Have you ever been in a crisis? So you may be in one now. I remember when my children were real little, like 2, 3, 4, 5, that age. A crisis is when somebody steals a Lego from, the other person, right? And my kids, fortunately, I only have 2. Um, so, you know what this is like if you've ever had kids. You're driving on vacation. We're going to take a family trip together. This is going to be glorious. That's the thought you have as a parent. This is great family. I don't know if your family's like mine. Maybe yours were. Maybe you speak King James English at your house. I don't know. I don't. I speak like one more time, you're in trouble. That's more of our language. So we're on vacation. You're driving somewhere. She touched me. He looked at me. That's a crisis, right? When you're real little. Then your kids get a little bit older, and the crises are much more challenging. They become much more real. And kids get in junior high and high school. There's issues of the heart. There's rejection. There's bullying. They go through their challenges of peer pressure. And they didn't make the team. Nobody talks with them. Things are said about them on Instagram or whatever it is. And you've been there. And you know that there starts to develop pain on the inside. This girl used to talk to me. I thought we were going to be on a date when we got older. Whatever it is, right? And they're dropped. And you can feel the pain. You've been there. You were a child once. You go through those adolescent years, and you know something. You know this is the beginning. And you know that they're going to have to learn to deal with some of these challenges. Because for the rest of their life, these things are going to come. Now you're thinking right now, this is going to be a pleasant message. But we'll get there. We'll get there. Then as you get older, you see your kids go through things. Maybe a horrible thing like what's going to happen with this man today as he watches his son at this point of dying. You go through things. You go through things yourself. There's cancer involved. There is death. There is pain. And the reality of it is, with Jesus, there's encouragement. We've witnessed in our country this past week another horrible crime committed with a young kid who goes and kills 17 people in his high school in Florida. And you think, why? Well, this is the world we're in. This is the world Jesus entered into. Because it's not supposed to be this way. This is why he came. We'll get to that a little bit later, a few more minutes. We'll get back to that. But understand this. This man, today we're going to be with him. John chapter 4, he's a man with a crisis. And there really is going to be good news by the time we got to get to about the halfway point. I promise. I promise. We're going to get there. Jesus loves you. So let's set up the scene, all right? Get a little bit of history. You guys good with that? Okay, because if you aren't, it is what it is. So remember where we've been. In John chapter 4, Jesus, the Bible tells us, he needed to go through Samaria. Jesus was in this place. Let's see if this works. It's hard to see. He was baptizing. He and his disciples were down here. See that? The red dot? On the Jordan River. Here's Judea. Here's Samaria. Here's Galilee. The Bible told us that Jesus left the area of the Jordan River where John was baptizing and Jesus was down there. And he had to go back up to Galilee. However, the Bible told us that he needed to go through Samaria. You remember why he needed to go through Samaria? If you were with us, it'll be a quick refresher. If you weren't with us, you'll be back up to speed within 1 minute, I promise. Or you'll be up to speed within 1 minute. The Bible told us he needed to go through Samaria, and the reason why on his way to Galilee is because there was a woman who was a Samaritan woman who was going to meet Jesus. She was known as the woman at the well, and there Jesus, she was waiting at the well, and she came out, and Jesus said to her, "Woman, may I have a drink?" And she said, "You, being a Jew, ask me, a Samaritan, for a drink." And Jesus said, "Yeah, and if you knew the water I give you, you would never thirst again." Jesus was reeling her in. Woo. whew, he was going to save her, and he indeed did save her soul. She gets saved. She goes back and tells the people in the village, come and see the man. And the people in the village came out, and they met with Jesus, and they heard from Jesus, and they also got saved. So we pick up after Jesus leaves the Samaritans in the village, we pick up as he heads back, as he continues on his journey toward the area of Galilee. So that's where we are. John chapter 4, Jesus is going to meet a man with a crises. Verse 43 tells us, now after the 2 days, Jesus departed from there and he went to Galilee. After the 2 days, what's that mean? Jesus had stayed in the Samaritan village where the Samaritan woman was and the people of Samaria that got saved. He stayed there. They asked him, will you stay with us? The Bible told us he stayed there 2 days. So after those 2 days were done, after he's leaving that village, that's what's being referred to in verse 43, he continues his journey up north toward Galilee. Verse 44 tells us, for Jesus himself testified that a prophet has no honor in his own country. So when he came to Galilee, the Galileans received him, having seen all the things he did in Jerusalem at the feast, for they also had gone to the feast. Okay, let's stop here for just a couple of minutes. We won't be here long. 3 main points. Here's the first one, is Jesus and the return to Galilee. Now, I want you to notice this. It appears there's a discrepancy in the Scripture. Verse 44 says that the Bible tells us, in fact, it was Jesus himself who said elsewhere, a prophet is not received in his own country. So verse 44 is essentially Jesus knowing that the people in his own country, the Galilee region, don't receive him, right? Simple enough, that's verse 44. However, verse 45 seems to be a contradiction because he's in Galilee and I'm not received in Galilee. Yet verse 45 says, when he got to Galilee, the people did receive him. And notice in verse 45 why the people received him in Galilee. Because they saw the miracles he did when he was at the feast in Jerusalem. Aha! Okay, so there's this problem. Verse 44, I'm not received in Galilee is essentially what that's about. Verse 45, I am received in Galilee. Huh? The key is in verse 45 in understanding. They received Jesus, verse 45, again, because they saw the miracles he did, the great works he did in Jerusalem at the feast. What happened at the feast? Think in your mind with me. If you weren't with us, that's okay. It'll still make sense. Back in chapter 2 of John, Jesus does a miracle in Cana of Galilee. He turns water to wine. Remember that? It's one miracle everybody seems to remember. Oh, I remember he turned water to wine. So he did. Right? Then it's another story. So he leaves Cana. He goes down to Jerusalem. It's the Feast of Passover. When he was at Jerusalem, the end of chapter 2 said, Jesus did many miracles there, and the people believed in him. However, he did not commit himself to them because he knew what was in the heart of the people that saw him do the miracles. In other words, it wasn't a genuine belief. It was a superficial belief in Jesus. He did miracles. He's a great magician. Give us one more meal, Jesus. Give us the happy meal for free, that kind of thing. Oh, heal my friend. Give us that. But they didn't have a genuine belief in Jesus. They just liked the tricks that Jesus did. So these Galileans, verse 45, they saw the miracles Jesus did in Galilee, in Jerusalem. Now Jesus is up in Galilee. They're up in Galilee again. So now it makes sense. Verse 44, a prophet's not received in his own country. That's Jesus about himself in Galilee. Verse 45, they saw the miracles he did in Galilee, but they still didn't receive him. We know they didn't receive him because chapter 2 told us that. Make sense? If it didn't make sense, I'm not going to re-explain it. Let's just move on. We got territory to cover. You ready? We're not going to revisit that either. Are you ready? Okay, because here's where the rubber meets the road for this man with the crisis. Verse 46. So when Jesus came again to Cana of Galilee, where he had made the water wine, and there was a certain nobleman whose son was sick at Capernaum. So 2 cities are mentioned here, Cana of Galilee and Capernaum, right? And when he heard that Jesus had come out of Judea into Galilee, he went to him, and implored him to come down and heal his son, verse 47, for his son was at the point of death. So the first thing we have here is the return to Galilee. The second main point we notice is the reason for his return to Galilee. Notice two cities are mentioned. There's Cana of Galilee and Capernaum. So this is what's going on. Jesus is now up in this area up here. That's the Galilee region. You can see that? That's the Sea of Galilee. So he came up through Samaria, comes up here. Let's get a close-up. The city of Capernaum is mentioned. That's over here. And the city of Cana is mentioned. This is where Jesus meets the man, the nobleman who come from Capernaum, because the nobleman had a son who was sick. Jesus, in John chapter 4 earlier, he went through Samaria because he had an appointment with the Samaritan woman. The appointment, they were going to meet at the well. Remember that? Jesus had put it on that woman's calendar. She didn't know it, but she had an appointment with the Savior of souls, the forgiver of sins. Jesus has an appointment with this nobleman in Cana of Galilee. What happens is Jesus uses this man's son who is sick at Capernaum to get him from Capernaum to come and meet him in Cana of Galilee. And Jesus is going to perform an incredible miracle. It's just over 20 miles, the distance from Cana to Capernaum. If you happen to go on our next trip to Israel with us, we'll visit Nazareth, we'll visit Capernaum. In fact, we'll even stay in the area of Tiberias, and you'll get a really good handle on the distance and the topography and all that. So it's about a 4-hour journey, about 20 miles from Cana to Capernaum, and this man had traveled to Cana because there he's going to meet Jesus. But we're told here that this man was a nobleman. It's worth noting that he wasn't just an ordinary man. The term nobleman comes from this Greek word which means a royal official or a king's man. Now here's the deal, and this gives us some background to really help us understand how all of this comes together and then how it impacts us. So he's a king's man. That means he served as a steward, as a main person. He is part of the administration of King Herod's team. King Herod Antipas, who was the tetrarch of the area of Galilee. Who was King Herod Antipas, or Herod Antipas? He was the son of Herod the Great. You know who Herod the Great was? Okay, Herod the Great is the one who built what's in Jerusalem today, the Temple Mount. He took Mount Moriah, he built a retaining wall all the way around Mount Moriah, and made it a 40-acre flat parcel at the top. He filled it in, leveled it off at the top, and then on the top of the Temple Mount, he built the temple. Okay, that's Herod the Great. Now, Herod the Great, you might think, well, that's pretty cool. Well, Herod the Great was a bad person. Herod the Great is the one who had all of the little boys, when Jesus was born, 2 years of age and younger, slaughtered because he didn't want any competition. Herod the Great was a bad man. Herod Antipas, who this nobleman worked for, was the son of Herod the Great. Now, Herod Antipas, just to give you a little bit of an understanding of who he was, Herod Antipas, being the tetrarch of Galilee, that meant one of four. When Herod the Great divided his kingdom or set up his kingdom, he had 4 rulers, he had 4 sons, and he put each one of his sons over the different jurisdictions. Make sense? You guys still tracking with me? So Herod Antipas was the tetrarch of the Galilee region. Herod Antipas is the one that mocked Jesus. On the night that Jesus was crucified, or turned over to be crucified, he was taken before Herod Antipas, and Herod Antipas is the one who made fun of Jesus. Herod Antipas is the one who said, "Do a trick for me. I have heard about you." Herod Antipas is the one who had the head of John the Baptist cut off. So Herod Antipas is a bad person. His dad was a bad person. This nobleman was an administrator in the court of this bad man named Herod Antipas. Think of a president and the presidential administration. They're powerful and they have great influence. As a nobleman like this man would have had great influence, he would have been powerful, and he would have had some serious wealth. Verse 47 informs us that this royal official came to Jesus because his son was sick, and it tells us that how sick he was. He was sick to the point of death. He was really sick. When our daughter Hannah was born, it was January 2005, I remember it well. She was in the hospital for about 2 weeks in ICU, and going to visit her. I was brand new at this church, and Jackie went and stayed with her night and day, and I couldn't get away from the church. And it was hard for me. I got there when I could, but I couldn't spend as much time there. But when I would go to the hospital, she was hooked up to all kinds of tubes. She had a lot of different complications when she was born. But the one thing that startled me was she had this tube that was put into the top of her skull. And that vision, there's some things you can't unsee, they say. And looking at that. And over my years of ministry, I've talked with some people that have been through much greater crises with their children than I ever was with mine. It's been said that nothing can shatter us more quickly or more completely than affliction falling upon our children. So here we have this rich man, and regardless of wealth, education, status, or popularity, and on down the list, trouble and sorrow and death come to all. And here, death was knocking at the door of this nobleman, this king's man's son. A couple of takeaways here, all right? I promise you this is going to go good, but we're going to feel this pain for just a few minutes, all right? You guys okay? First takeaway is this: everyone experiences sorrow. There are no exceptions. The rich man, the poor man, the powerful men, powerless men. If you're old enough to remember the TV program MASH, how many of you remember that? There's one episode where the conversation about the war was about death and destruction and the horror of it all. It was a medical facility, right, out there in the middle of the war, and the conversation was, it went along these lines as one of the people was explaining to the other ones. In war, you need to understand that there's two rules. Rule number one is young men die. Rule number two is doctors can't change rule number one. That's where this man is. Job wrote, a man who went through great affliction, lost a lot, including family. Job chapter 5 says this: "For affliction does not come from the dust, nor does trouble spring from the ground, yet man is born to trouble as the sparks fly upward." That phrase, "as the sparks fly upward," is conveyed with much greater depth in the Hebrew, because the two words that are used for that phrase literally mean sons of flame. The idea is this: men are born to endure the fires of this life. I think of that, and then I think of the school shooting in Florida this past week. Here's the truth. There are painful things that happen in this world. This is why Jesus came, to redeem us from sin, to redeem us from sin's curse. I was involved in various conversations over this past week because of the Florida school shooting, and some of them as close as certain people are to me in this life. I come from a very large family. Some are believers in Christ and some are not. And me being the only pastor in the family, for those who don't believe in Jesus, I become the target of aggression. Why would God allow something like that, right? How many of you have heard that over the last week and tried to explain it? I said, here's the problem. You wouldn't receive it if I give you the answer. You ask me why God. I say, okay, here's why God. And they say, you can't bring God into it. Well, then how am I going to answer your question? Right? That's how it goes, isn't it? Right? So I said, well, here's the truth. Sin introduced. I don't want to hear about sin. Now, get me on your religious kick. but it's the truth, right? This is why Jesus came, because this world's not supposed to be like this. Even Jesus himself said the enemy has come to kill and steal and destroy. That's the enemy. In a world that has rejected God. But Jesus said, I have come to give life and give it abundantly. I've come to redeem you from this sin-cursed world so that when you die, you'll be with me forever and ever and ever. Listen, I'm going to ask you to do this for me. I appreciate it. A few years ago, I taught a series here on heaven. I've been wanting to do one on suffering and why we go through that, and I really want to do it on Sunday mornings because I think we need to know for ourselves, but also how to answer someone. Will you pray for me for that? I want to take a few weeks out just to help us work through that because things happen like this, and they happen on an individual basis too, and we wonder why do these things happen. Number two, second takeaway, invite Jesus into your crises. This man, he serves in King Herod's court. He's an administrator. He's a bigwig. He's a Roman. He's going to this humble Jewish rabbi. He swallowed his pride. He didn't let pride get in the way, and he invited Jesus into his problem, into his crisis. I want to encourage you. You got a crisis. You got a situation. You need wisdom. You need help. You need an answer. Invite Jesus in. All right, think of it like this. As rich as this man was, he knew some things. Money can buy a king-size bed, but it can't buy sleep. It can buy a beautiful house, but it can't buy a home. It can buy a companion, but it can't buy a true friend. Right? I remember seeing an interview with a gentleman. He became a superstar in the NFL, and he was rich. And then after he's out of NFL and all the money's gone, he said he lost all of his friends too. Money can buy a church building, but it can't buy entrance into heaven. This noble man, this king's man, was a man of importance and wealth, but he couldn't buy life for his son. He was in agony. He is in deep hurt. His son is dying. But he humbled himself, and he made sure to invite Jesus into his problem. A third and final takeaway, or final main point is this. We're on the road where Jesus meets us. That's where this man is. Verse 48. Then Jesus, he says to the nobleman, this sounds so mean, unless you people see signs and wonders, you'll by no means believe. What's going on there? It sounds so mean. Unless you people, right? It kind of sounds like that. What was he saying? Remember the context. The Galileans were in Jerusalem when Jesus did miracles. Remember that? I shared that with you, right? They saw the miracles that Jesus did, but Jesus didn't commit himself to them because they really didn't believe in him. Remember that? So they're now up in Galilee. Here's this man with a real need. He does not say, you, sir, have a problem. Unless you see me do something, you won't believe. He doesn't say that. You people. He's addressing the people who he knew their hearts weren't for him. You people just want to see me do a magic trick. Here is a man with a real need. This man is hurting inside. His son is dying, and you just want to see me do a magic show. I'm here because of people like him who care for their family, and they want to know God, and they want to see me work in their life. So that's what's going on here when he says, you people. Make sense? I care about this man. Verse 49, the nobleman said to Jesus, sir, come down before my child dies. In other words, come to Capernaum. Make the 20-mile trip. Verse 50, Jesus says to the man, go your way, your son lives. So the man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him, and he went his way. And when he was now going down, his servants met him and told him, saying, your son lives. And then he inquired of them the hour when he got better. And they said to him, yesterday at the 7th hour, the fever left him. So the father knew that it was at the same hour in which Jesus said to him, your son lives. And he himself believed, and his whole household. And this again is the second sign Jesus did when he had come out of Judea and into Galilee. I love this. I love this as Jesus meets this man where he is. But he's in this crisis, and he meets him. A couple of years ago, when Sam, worship leader Sam's son, had passed away in a car accident, there was a lady here who had gone through some really serious trials. And there's a lot of, I understand, between all the services here, and you look at the other churches and the whole valley and people who aren't church, there's people who go through really hard things, right? And Sam's son had died, and this lady had approached me during that time frame. Wonderful lady. And she's alone. Her husband's gone. And I've had a couple of conversations with her since. She has lost 3 children. And she loves the Lord. And she knows she's going to see them again. This is why Jesus came. 2 years ago, I did a series on heaven. I take that DVD series. This is a 10-week series. I take it with me to all the prophecy conferences I do. I haven't spoken on heaven at any conference yet. But it's always the most popular item that I have at the table. People want that. You want to know why? Because people need hope. And that lady knows this, that her children are in the place where there's no more tears, no more crying, no more suffering. There's no more funeral homes. There's no more hospital beds. There's none of that. And one day, we'll be there. It's hope. Jesus is bringing hope and healing. And the ultimate healing is we're home with him, because this isn't the way it's supposed to be. But notice this in verse 47. He says to Jesus, my son is sick. In verse 49, he says to Jesus, sir, come down before my child dies. Right? Check this out, the progression from son to child. The word son comes from a Greek word which means son of a man or a grandson. You know, it's the physical thing. Verse 49, child comes from a Greek word pedon. It means a little boy or a little girl. Jesus, my little child is dying. The baby I held in my arms is dying. This is what's going. Understand. Sometimes when we read the Bible, it's just a story, like Hollywood has stories. This is a real man. This hurts a lot. The psalmist wrote in Psalm 31 and also in Psalm 86, bow down your ear to me, O Lord, hear my cry. Right? The picture that the psalmist gives there is of a child in bed that is in great physical agony, crying out to their daddy, Daddy, bow down your ear to me. So the psalmist says, bow down your ear to me, God, Papa in heaven. I need you. This is where this man is. Jesus, hear me. Help me. My child is going to die. He's got a broken heart. I rocked my child to sleep when he was just a little baby. And I don't care how important I am in the king's court. You are the only one I can turn to. Please hear me. And Jesus says, your son lives. Jesus wasn't put off by distance or by separation. By his word, he was healed. Third takeaway is God allows what he hates in order to accomplish what he loves. Johnny Erickson Tada dove into a shallow pool of water when she was a teenager. She's now much older. She's older than me. That's old. For some of you are thinking, that's young. No, it's old. If you're 16, it's old. She dove in, broke her neck, became a quadriplegic, lives with severe pain to this day. But she gets saved, and she questioned why. And God has used her more than most people ever get used in a lifetime as a quadriplegic. He allows what he hates in order to accomplish what he loves. Look what happens with this man. Verse 51, look at this again. As the man was now going down, in other words, he's going on his way to Capernaum, his servants met him and said to him, your son lives, right? So he's going down to Capernaum. His servants are coming up with a report. Guess what? Your son's doing great, right? And then he, the nobleman, inquired of his servants, verse 52, the hour when he got better, and he said to them, yesterday at the 7th hour the fever left him. Aha! That's the same time that Jesus says, your son lives. It happened at the same time. 7th hour is 1 in the afternoon. 1 in the afternoon to 5. Listen, if it was a 4-hour journey to get from Cana to Capernaum, this is interesting. Why didn't he go? Because notice, it says here, yesterday at the 7th hour the fever left him. The man stayed in Cana the rest of the afternoon. Jesus told him at 1 in the afternoon, your son lives. He stays the rest of the afternoon with Jesus. He stays that night with Jesus. Sometime the next day, he leaves Cana to go to Capernaum. In fact, I'm thinking if that was me and Jesus says, your son lives, I'd be booking. I'd get on the fastest horse I could. I'd be down there in 20 minutes. 20 miles, I get there fast. Maybe not 20 minutes, I get there fast, though. Well, I probably would. That's a really fast horse. I just did the math now, because I didn't do it earlier. I didn't know I was going to say that. But why did he wait until he stayed with Jesus an extra afternoon, an extra night? He believed. This is true faith. He knew. What, you ever have those moments you absolutely believe, you know this is real? This is exactly what happened. He had this great faith, and he stays with Jesus. That is just wild. Verse 53, so the father knew that it was the same hour in which Jesus said to him, your son lives, and he himself believed, and his whole family. The whole family comes to faith in the Lord. I find that so cool. You and I are going to meet this little boy when we get to heaven and say, wow, Jesus healed you that time. We're going to meet this man, the nobleman. We're going to meet his wife. We're going to meet this kid's brothers and sisters. I think that's cool. His whole family got saved. Now, this is even, I'm going to show you this too. You can turn there if you want, but you don't have to for sake of time. This is totally cool. His whole family is saved, right? This nobleman. Check this out. Now, think of these words when I read them. 3 verses, Luke chapter 8. It says this, it came to pass that Jesus went through every city and village. Just think of these words. Preaching and bringing the glad tidings of the kingdom of God, and the 12 apostles were with him. And certain women who had been healed of evil spirits and infirmities, Mary called Magdalene, out of whom had come 7 demons, and Joanna, the wife of Chuza, Herod's steward, and Susanna and other women were with Jesus. Who were these women? These were the ones that made sure that Jesus and the disciples had meals, their clothes were sewn, their sandals were taken care of, that type of thing, right? And they followed him. They were people that were ministered to by Jesus. Now notice in that set of women, Mary Magdalene, Susanna, but also a woman named Joanna, the wife of Chuza, one of Herod's sons. Most scholars say this nobleman is Chuza. That's written about here. His wife, his whole family, we just read it, his whole household believes. And I look at this and I go, this to me is absolutely remarkable. Wow. The connection, this nobleman, his son is healed. He takes the message of Jesus back to his family believes, and his wife then ends up following Jesus with Mary Magdalene, these other people, until the point of the death of Jesus. That's remarkable. That's remarkable. 4th takeaway, Jesus is the answer to our own anxieties. Peter wrote, cast all your cares upon him, for he cares for you. I just say this real quick. I want to encourage you to daily be in the Word. Do your daily devotions. We have a Bible program online. Our website, you can go there, Bible readings every day. Listen, I wake up in the morning. Right now I'm in the book of Proverbs, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. But it helps to minister to you in your anxieties. In fact, that passage in Peter, he casts all your cares on him, for he cares for you, is also translated in other translations. Cast all your anxieties upon him, for he cares for you. Cast all your worries upon him, for he cares for you. And you cast them upon him by being in your word and praying, say, Lord, help me like this man did. Lord, help me heal my son. I need you. Last takeaway, these truths are for anyone that will allow Jesus into their life. This man had an appointment with Jesus in Cana. He didn't cancel the appointment. Jesus got his attention through the pain, right? Same thing with you and I. Jesus gets our attention. He has an appointment with us. We can cancel that appointment by here's the deal. You hold the key to your heart to allow Jesus into your life. Nobody else holds it. You are the person that decides, yes, Jesus, or you're the person that keeps the door locked and he ain't coming in. It's not my fault. It's not anybody else's fault that you don't open the door to your heart. Every single person has the key to their own heart to say, Jesus, I need you. Jesus, I want you. You make the decision. And I assure you that Jesus loves you. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him won't perish, but have everlasting life. You hold the key to your heart to unlock the door that Jesus might come in and forgive you and give you life now and life for eternity. Lord,